Have you ever looked at a big company and wondered, how did they keep track of all their money? Well, it might seem really complicated, but it all boils down to a few simple ideas. And in this explainer, we're going to break down the basics of accounting step by step. So let's start with the big question. What exactly is accounting? The easiest way to think about it is that it's the language of business. Yep, a language, and every company uses it to tell its story. Today, we're going to learn the first few words of that language. Here's our game plan. First, we'll get into the core of accounting. Then we'll look at the two main fields you'll find. After that, we'll see how accountants check the numbers to make sure they're right. And finally, we'll talk about maybe the most important part, playing by the rules. All right, let's jump right into section 1, the core of accounting. Think of these as the building blocks. Everything else we talk about today will be built right on top of these ideas. Okay, so here's the official definition. But what does that actually mean? In simple words, it's just looking at all the money a company spends and all the money it earns. And then you take all that information and tell the story of that money in a clear, simple report. That's it. Now, before you can tell that big story, you have to collect all the little details first, right? Well, that's called bookkeeping. It's the very first step. It's the simple, daily job of just writing down every single time money moves, every dollar that comes in, and every dollar that goes out. So let's really see the difference here. Think of it like this. Bookkeeping is like writing in a diary every single day, noting every little thing that happens. Accounting is like taking that diary at the end of the year and writing the full story of your year. So bookkeeping is the daily work, accounting is the big picture story. Okay, so we know what accounting is. Now let's look at the two main ways it's used. It's kind of like accounting has two different jobs, one for the people inside the company and one for the people outside the company. First up, we have financial accounting. This is the one for people outside the company. So think about people who own a part of the company, or maybe the banks who loaned the company money. They need to see these reports to understand how the business is really doing. And the second type? That's management accounting. And you guessed it, this is for the people inside the company, like the managers. They use all this data to help them make smart choices and good plans for where the company is headed next. This little table here sums it all up perfectly. See? Financial accounting looks outward. It reports to the world. Management accounting looks inward. It helps the team make decisions. The most important question is always, who is this information for? All right, let's move on to our third section, checking the numbers. Once all this information is recorded and put into reports, how do we know it's correct? How can we be sure that it's honest? Well, that's exactly what this part is all about. This whole process of checking the numbers is called auditing. Let's make that super simple. Auditing is kind of like being a detective for the company's money. An auditor carefully checks all the financial records, looking for any mistakes or for anything that isn't quite honest. And there are actually two main ways this check happens. First, there's an internal audit. That's when the company's own team checks its own work. But then, to be extra sure, there's an external audit. And that's when a totally independent person, someone from outside the company, comes in to check everything. That second check is so important for building trust. And speaking of trust, that brings us to our final section, playing by the rules. Because in accounting, just like in any game, there are rules. And there's a right way to do things and a definitely wrong way. Let's start with the wrong way. It's sometimes called creative accounting. This is when someone changes the numbers or records things dishonestly, all to make the company look way better than it actually is. It's basically painting a false picture. So to stop that kind of thing from happening, we have laws and standards. This is the right way. These are the official rules that every single company must follow to make sure the financial story they're telling is true and fair for everybody. So really, the difference couldn't be more clear. Following the laws and standards, that's the honest path. It shows the real story. Creative accounting, that's the dishonest path. It's just breaking the rules to show a false story. And this brings us to the most important point of this entire explainer. When companies play by the rules and show a true and fair picture of their money, people can trust them. Banks, investors, even customers, they can all feel safe. Trust is absolutely everything. So, I'll leave you with one final thought to chew on. After everything we've talked about today, really think about this. Why are rules and just plain old honesty so incredibly important in the world of business? Thanks for tuning in.